Communications Director for the National Grange. And tonight we are kicking off a special series called The Lessons of the Degrees, which is going to be hosted by our current High Priest of Demeter, Roger Bostwick, from the Assembly of Demeter. So this was his idea, and I'm just going to kick it right on over to Roger, so we can dive right into the first degree this tonight, which is all about spring. So Roger, take it away.
Thanks, Phil. Like Phil said, this is something we're going to try. I had a lot of people ask questions about the degrees. So I thought, well, we'll just start off with the spring and the first degree and go from there. As I said, I'm Roger Bostwick. I'm the current High Priest of Demeter of the National Grange. And one thing I want to ask first is, what are people kind of wanting from these meetings? Are they wanting instructional, want to hear the degrees? I'm going to give some instructions on what the lessons are, some of my opinions on what the Grange is and what the degrees mean. So what are you actually looking for, some of your ideas?
Roger,
Okay.
I'm looking for kind of a modern interpretation, something that I can take to new members, and say, when and if you see this, this is what you will see, but also here are those kind of core lessons that we get out of this season and this degree that if they're not going to see it.
Yeah, I know people have talked about updating the language, some of the language that's a little more common. I agree that some of the language is kind of outdated. But the question I have is, is that going to make people or interpret or encourage people to do the degrees, but just by changing the language? There's a lot of work to go through to read it and change it if no one's going to do it.
Roger.
But I agree that some of the language could be changed.
Roger.
Yes.
Al and I, about 8 years ago, we went through the first 5 degrees. It took us months to do it. We did not change any of the words. We changed the these and thous to you and us and this kind of thing. But if you read what we did and what's in the manual, they go almost exactly, other than I said changing the things. Like there's one place I think it's the lectures program where they talk about the intercourse of society. Well, we changed that because that always gets a laugh in the middle of the thing. So we have it done for the first 5 degrees. If you're interested in seeing it, I can email you what we have.
I would appreciate that, Vinny. Thank you. That way, if we decide to go that route, it'd be a lot easier if someone's already done that, to have that. And with it being digital, available through National now, it's easy to change.
So Roger, I'll just read you in case you didn't see in the comments. One person commented that they would like to hear the degrees. One person said a bit of everything. They are a newish Granger and haven't seen the first 4 in ceremony yet. One person commented they would like the history of the degrees. Somebody's looking for tools to teach the meanings of the degrees to new and old members. And then Lynette Schaefer said all the things you mentioned would be good. So
and most people anymore see or have the obligation or do the obligation through the little obligation ceremony. That actually isn't meant to be a one and done, though. Even if you read in the beginning of it, it says at some point they want you to witness the entire degrees. And you can't, the way I look at it is, if you take the obligation, you're agreeing to uphold principles of the Grange, you're agreeing to promote the lessons of the Grange. You're signing a contract without reading. I mean, you're agreeing to things, but you haven't gone through the degrees to know what you're agreeing to determine that. So it's good that we get to see the degrees or do the degrees at some point. one of the questions that I've often heard is relevance. And are the degrees relevant?
Yes.
And when you think about, are they relevant to our society today? And when you think about as we open or close our meetings, or what we do when we confer our degrees, it really has no direct bearing outside of our walls. Now, so really, when you think about outside of the Grange, are our degrees relevant? So before Phil goes and writes a headline that says the high priest just said the degrees aren't relevant, I want to continue. The lessons that we have in the degrees and the principles expressed therein are what we as Grangers use in guiding our actions on how we conduct ourselves as individuals and as Grangers in our interaction with our communities and those who we partner with, and those who ask us to partner with them. That is where the true relevance of the degrees are realized. What we do in our meetings and what we teach our members, how we go out in the world as Grangers, that's where the relevance is. They really don't care what we do in our meetings when we do them, but it's to those members that, or the non-members that see what we do in our communities and say, hey, got something good. I want to be part of it. So that's where the relevance is in our members and teaching them good Grange principles. Any comments on that, or anyone feel different, or what do you think about what I just said, though, about relevance outside our walls? Inside our walls, there is always relevance, there always has been. Now we'll start out, we talk about the lessons. So in the beginning, right at the front page of the first degree, it says the lesson is faith. So I've always said that the Grange is a faith-based organization. People say, oh, it's a religious organization. I said, no, it's faith-based. They said, what's the difference? I said, well, Grange is based on agriculture. Farming is a faith-based operation. You put your seed in your ground, and you have faith that it's going to come up and produce a crop to support your family. So agriculture is faith-based. The Grange is faith-based. All throughout the first degree, there are examples of faith. You begin the degree, you're blindfolded, and you're led around by people that you might not be that familiar with, but you've got faith that they're going to lead you around that hall without causing any damage or harm to you. Now, we're not hiding secrets from you by blindfolding you. We're simply stating you're putting your faith in other people. So anyone who's performed the degrees, how do you do that? Do you just have them, line up just 3 or 4 people, or do you usually use the entire candidate group?
Our Grange takes a pair of, 2 pairs of male and female as our marching candidates.
I was going to say, generally, that's how our Pomona does it. It depends on how many we've got. If we only had 6 total, we'd probably march all them. But we're more apt to have 3 women and then have to go get some guys from the sideline to make the even couples, because we tend to have more women than men take the degrees.
I know some of the examples are throughout there. As when you're blindfolded, the president says, friends, your present condition is but an example of faith and emblematic of a higher confidence in a supreme being. We are constantly passing blindly along the pathway of life, events occurring that we do not understand and often encountering difficulties and obstructions in our way. But we should press forward, having faith that God will ultimately bring us to the broad and pleasant fields of paradise. I know when they did the 1863 degrees, they had 2x4s and things down for the people to walk over, representing the plowed fields. I had seen that done that way. I've seen it done with mattresses to walk over. Some granges get very elaborate in their scene during the blindfolded part of guiding them over the fields and everything. Another example of the faith is grass being the basis of agriculture. Without it, the earth would be arid and barren waste. It's emblematic of man's transitory state upon the earth, and also a brighter and more glorious truth. As the grass awakens to life in the call of spring, does not each tiny spirit that shoots forth from the ground preach to you the resurrection and immortality, the faith of a higher manhood and womanhood? Later on, it talks about the faith of giving you the corn and teaching you to plant the corn and keep a best portion of it for seed. And that's a symbol of faith. It's a faith that has a realization and a promised reward by getting the full ear in the corn. Anyone's free to comment that has questions or comments at any time. I'm just going to go over some of the things that I've got here in the notes, but I encourage everyone to speak up, and if they got questions, please feel free to do so. Of course, the last part is the salutation of this degree signifies that a member of the Grange or this degree places faith in God. One other thing that you don't learn in the obligation is the implement box and what each tool in there is used for. In the first 4 degrees, it uses the axe, the plow, the harrow, and the spade. The axe is used to cut away obstacles and obstructions in the field and to prepare the timber for use. The axe teaches us perseverance, one of the other lessons of this degree. But also, if at first you don't succeed, try again. That's what the axe teaches us. The plow. The plow is used to break up the ground and prepare for planting. Teaches us to drive the plowshare of thought diligently through the heavy soil of ignorance, and thus prepare the mind for growth and knowledge of wisdom. Teaches us to think through our problems. Now, the harrow is used to pulverize the soil, as well as to cover the seed. Let that be emblematic of the course of study and observation. Be observant in everything that we do. And last, of course, is the spade. We use the spade when we wish to penetrate deeper into the soil than we can with the use of the plow. It becomes emblematic of thoroughness. So whatsoever you attempt to do, strive to do well. So the degree teaches us perseverance, thought, to be thorough, and to think through our problems, and to be observant. Get down. For those of you that have seen the degree, have you understood what they're meaning when they're showing those implements out of the implement box? If you haven't seen the degree, you probably don't even know why it's up there, unless someone's taken the time to explain it to you. It's one of the importance of seeing the degrees to teach or to show our new members what the Grange principles are all about. what are some of the other people that are familiar with it? What are some of the other things that the first degree teaches us? At one point, when the overseer has your memorandum book, your pencil, and your knife, teaches you to jot down things so you can remember. Now, as you get older, like me, you do use that a lot. I tend to use the note app on my phone more than anything, and it's not just things that I want to remember. It's ideas that I come up with from here and there. My dad always had a small memo book in his overalls and a pencil. He would write down things that later he'd put down in a full journal, about maybe where a calf was born, when a calf was born, repairs that need to be done at some point. But he'd keep that in a notebook. And this was teaching, because at the beginning, when the degrees were written, only farmers were Grangers. They were exclusively for farmers in the very beginning. So this was teaching them ideas to be better farmers, to elevate and educate the American farmer, as the Grange says. So that's one of the other teachings of the Grange, is to be as well as be observant, to note what you see and write it down. There's lessons in the degree that teach some of the Grange philosophies. Be kind to animals. The Stewart, in one point, talks about paying attention to the domestic animals and see if they're treated kindly. If you are not kind with the animals, it could actually get you expelled from the Grange. In the steward's charge, it's one of the objects of our order to protect the dumb animals from abuse, and any member who condones their ill treatment is liable to censure, suspension, or expulsion. We regard that high, and most farmers that I ever talk to will say they treat their animals the way that they would like to be treated themselves. They don't abuse them. They don't misharm them. They do what they're intended to use with them. And that's their livelihood. They're not going to go out and do something. And that's one of the things the Grange teaches, that you should always, be kind to your animals. The other thing it teaches is equality. You start out, you're blindfolded, and you're wearing a shroud, or the women are wearing the shroud. And that teaches you not to judge a book by its cover, that sometimes that the outer garments are not necessarily what lies underneath. And as a fraternal organization, we're all brothers and sisters, and we treat each other as a family.
I was going to say, Roger, that's in the chaplain's charge of the first degree. Is the last couple sentences are explaining how women are equal with men, and that's how it was created. And it's probably the first time, I'm assuming, it's mentioned in Grange ritual, and kind of not justifies it, but explains it quite well.
Right. It's in first degree, as you said. It explains that women are on an equal charge with men. There's several spots in there that I didn't pull out in the degrees, so weren't going to go over the entire degree, which, from what I'm hearing, some people would like to hear it that way, the entire degree. We can work on that for the second degree. And we'll get comments and questions of what people think of how this is done here first, in the first degree, and then we'll go from there. But so I'm just kind of hitting some highlights of the first degree, just kind of get a feel for what people are looking for.
Roger, one of my favorite parts of the first degree is where the steward steps out representing ignorance and does a portion saying, It's better to be lazy with me. It's better to, not do a whole lot. And then the assistant steward says the what is he? The worst of the enemies of progress is ignorance. And so the importance of knowing why we're traveling and being well educated, and not just from a school perspective, but from a worldly perspective is important.
Right, right. Like you said, the stewards being being the part of ignorance and saying that come tarry with me, take it easy for a while, rest from your labors. Don't worry about getting everything done. Take it easy, and like I said, the assistant steward says, don't listen to him. Ignorance and sloth.
Hey, Roger, it's Martha. I'm under the California State Grange banner.
Hey, Martha.
Just I'll relate to some of you an experience we had here in California with the implement box. We were organizing a new Grange and taking them all their stuff. And Joseph was going, going through the box and talking about the different implements. And I guess the guy wasn't really paying attention, but he called the next couple of days and he was just ready to drop the Grange because we had this 6-sided star down there. And that was just, we were devil worshipers. And he was just going on and on and on. And Joseph and I looked at each other and he says, obviously he's never known farming. He doesn't know what a drag plow is. And, it's the thing of it caused us to, as we go out and work with Granges, to be ensured to tell them that while we may not farm with implements like these today, back when the Grange was started, these were the implements of the day, and explain what they were and what their purposes were without, getting into all the degree work, so that they would feel comfortable having them sitting on the desk.
I know the star harrow, probably can't see a good picture of it. I have never seen a harrow in the shape of a star in any old implement books anywhere else. I have a feeling that the star came from the founders that were Masons. The star is used not just by the Grange and Masons and fraternal organizations. It's used by corporations and everything as a sign of truth and power. And I've seen a triangle harrow, but I've never seen, most of them are rectangle. I've never seen the stars, which kind of leads me to believe it came from the founders that were Masons and their use of the star. But yeah, I mean, it's if they look at it closely, they could see the tines of the harrow on the bottom of it, and know that this is a box of farm implements, not a satanic ritual or symbol or anything like that.
I did Google drag harrow, and I can't find a site right now, but there was an old antique site, and they had one. It was a little more rounded, not quite as pointed as what we use in our box, but it gave you the idea that it was going to cover, and if you look at the way the tines on the harrow are placed, it's really to pulverize that ground. It's repeatedly going over that ground.
Yeah. I've read Kelly's book, History of the Grange, and I haven't read it entirely. I kind of read it till I find the part that I'm looking for. I haven't seen anything explaining why they use any of the symbols in the order that they use them, or where they came up with the ideas. I'm sure it's somewhere in there. Someone might have, but I haven't heard explanation of why they use the star. Like I said, my belief is they probably just used it from their Masonic teachings.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have anything?
Roger, this is Chris. One of the things that I wanted to mention, and that our community Grange always did a great job of in explaining the degrees as we were putting them on, was that there was always one or two folks that were assigned the job of communicating prior to the degree work to the candidates what they were going to see. And so it gave you some context to the degree work, and then they always talked about this this foundation and this logical progression, right? So when the first degree is springtime and the second degree is summer, well, guess what the third is, right? I mean, it's not like it's out of order or it's out of balance, or it's just this progression. And I always thought that was almost more instructional than the degree work, because it was done in the kitchen. It was done, just that seasoned member to the new candidates, talking about the importance of the lessons, and that this was going to build, that the first degree was needed in order to better understand the second, and then the second to the third. And I think that's where we see most of the disconnect, is when our new members don't get the opportunity to see and to become familiar with those first 4 or 5 degrees, and then the first thing that they see is the sixth. That can be a little bit of an overload, right? And so that's part of that I would always encourage, is if you get somebody that can help those candidates understand what they're going to be hearing and seeing, and how it builds on itself, have always found that to be a great add.
Thanks, Chris. That's another thing I wanted to address in this, is having ideas of other Granges around the country that do the degrees regularly, and maybe get some ideas from them, how you can do your degrees to make it a little easier for you, or make it a little more meaningful. I know the 7th degree is followed by the convocation, which basically is describing what they had just seen in the 7th degree. I think, I know most people want to take all 4 and get it over with in one day. I think when it was done originally, was once a season. It took you a year to become a Grange member, at least the stories that I've heard of that way. So that gave you time to take the first degree, learn about what you just learned in that degree, before you went on to do the 2nd degree. As Chris said, progression. I know, people don't have the patience anymore. They want to get it done now, and taking all 4 degrees in one day is only 2-3 hours, depending on how much of the marching and tableaus and things you do. But it doesn't take that long of an afternoon. But I agree with what Chris said about having some explanation, maybe just a short explanation between the degrees, to give a little more teaching about what they had just witnessed and what the progression is. So thanks, Chris.
Roger? Pete.
Yeah, Pete.
Now, Chris, we kind of did the opposite way. We always talked about it after degree over pie and coffee, and kind of debriefed them that way. That way they had questions afterwards. We could explain to them, okay, this is why. But I like your idea too of a little beforehand conversation.
Trust me, we never missed out on the pie and coffee.
Yeah. No, never.
Any other questions about first degree?
Roger, I just want to quickly, in the comments, Steve Coy wrote, "To me, faith-based in relation to the Grange differs from organized religion, as it offers no path to the hereafter, but does offer sound principles of faith that are needed to succeed in this life." So I just have a question on that, in that in the first degree, the master, the president says, "Friends, your present condition is but an example of faith and emblematic of a higher confidence in a supreme being." Can you talk to that about the Grange's position on using Christianity or Christian-based religion as kind of a basis of our ritual and of our work?
The Grange, the Grange embraces everyone. The when it was written, of course, a lot of Grosh ran a lot of it, and he was a reverend. So it is a lot based on Christianity. I think Christ is only mentioned twice in all of the degrees. For the most part, they talk about the great master of the universe, the Almighty Master. They leave it pretty much open. I do know, like I said, I think in the 7th degree, Christ is mentioned. And I believe there's one other degree where Christ is mentioned briefly. But for the most part, I think it does go along the Christian-based beliefs. But there's been questions before of do we have to go with that, with that aspect? I know I've heard some people that they have people in their Grange that are of different religions, Muslim or Jewish, and they are, when they go to the part of either the obligation or a prayer or something like that, they just basically allow them not to have to say the actual words. They're still believing it. They know they joined our organization not necessarily for a religious purpose. They joined our organization for other things that we stand in or stand for. I know for the most part, when you read it, it is Christian based, but we are open to all religions. And Granges, individual Granges with different beliefs or members with different beliefs or different religions have worked around it. They've found ways to work around it.
Roger, it's Heidi from New York.
Hi,
When I was in college, I did a term paper on what the Grange was. And my feedback from my professor was, oh, it's a nice church organization. And he says, you do a lot for your church. I didn't know how to respond without losing it.
Yeah. I've had a lot of people have come up and said that it is a church-based organization. It's not a specific church-based organization. We do believe in a higher authority, a higher power. But for the most part, it doesn't say what that higher power means to the individual. It's your interpretation of what that higher power is. Even though it does, as it reads, it does read Christianity. But it is left, quite a bit of it is left open to your own interpretation. Anyone else have any questions, comments, or ideas?
I'll just throw this in for fits and giggles. I think when we go to talk to not necessarily new members, but members that have no clue as to what any of this degree stuff is, that instead of saying, well, we haven't done it in 40 years, and I think we ought to do it before we forget how, we need to put some enthusiasm behind what we're doing. Hey, number one, we can be a part of recreating history today if we haven't done it in a while. We, are doing something that has come down through the 150 plus years of the Grange. And it's used, put yourself back in the 1870s and 1880s. They're still recovering from the Civil War. They don't have a lot of books. They don't have movies, cell phones, skate parks, to keep, name off all the things. What do they have? They have community. They have a meeting place that is used by a number of different groups and organizations. And this was not only educational, but it was entertainment as well. We have one of the new Granges. It's actually J.W.A. Wright's Grange that we reorganized in Turlock. And it was a bunch of kids that had lost their 4-H program, and they wanted to come to the Grange for our youth fair program. And we said, yes, please come on, but you realize you have to be a Grange member. The youth fair is just a committee of the Grange. And the couple that was really kind of shepherding this group of young people, we handed him manuals and said, this will get you started. Just take a look at them. We'll be back in a month and help you work through it. And he looked at it and said, he was an act teacher. I work with kids at school. They love to play act. So he signed everybody apart. And for the next 6 months, at every meeting, their lecturers program was to go through and read the degrees. They didn't try to act them out. They just read them and they discussed them. And they're the Grange that still has probably the youngest membership of the Granges here in California. And they come to state conventions, and we're trying to get more, but budgets are limited. But they don't squawk about it. So tap your young people who like to be engaged in acting roles and taking part in things, because they've got the enthusiasm, they've got the energy, and just make it sound like it's going to be a really good time, and they're usually ready to jump on and do it with you.
Oh, that's something about a week ago or so, Chris and I were talking about, is it better to not see the degrees at all or see them done poorly? And I think just to see them, and it doesn't take that much. You don't have to memorize them. If you read through them 4 or 5 times, you get a pretty good idea. So when you read them again, for the candidates, you're not stumbling over the words and you're not thinking about what it is. Just read them a few times ahead of time when you get the opportunity, and it makes it a lot better. I mean, sight reading is difficult for a lot of people, so if they get a chance to practice it a few times, reading it is a lot easier the 4th or 5th time. So yeah,
Roger,
that's good.
Roger, a question here from Brittany Pittman in Washington says, for new Granges and Grangers, how would you recommend that they learn and understand the degree work without the opportunity to see and experience it? As an organization, we should be thinking about how we can garnish excitement and possible modernization to keep the lessons of our organization that are still relevant at the forefront of our organization. So basically, how do we make it exciting, and how do we learn the lessons if we don't have the opportunity to demonstrate it? The full degree, I mean.
It's a good question, Brittany. It's something I know has been kicked around. How do we make those lessons relevant? If they don't have to see the degree, I know just seeing the obligation doesn't give any of the lessons. I mean, it could be through your, say your lectures program. Just give a lesson. I know what Amanda's been doing through some of her heirloom project of putting out those quotes throughout the manual has helped. I mean, people read those and go, well, what does that mean? And think about it and discuss it. So that's something that you can work on your own individual Granges. Maybe a discussion group during a meeting of, okay, we're going to discuss the first degree, or discuss the first few pages of the first degree. Don't even have to discuss all of it, just to kind of get those lessons out there to make it more relevant, make it more fun. And like I said, in the discussion group, have people, question, what is your thought of this? Or question each other. That's a good question, Brittany. Thank you.
And then we have a comment from Mark Naylor that says, we need to stress these were written based upon agriculture, but they are actually life lessons. So you don't have to know agriculture to apply them to your life.
That's something I've said before too, that they're life lessons through agriculture. Like with the implements, the perseverance and the thought process of thinking things out and before you act and observing things around you. So yeah, life lessons through agriculture. Very good, Mark. Thank you.
And Roger, I just want to add, for anybody who wants to read through the degrees, the manual is available in the Grange publications section of the members side of our website. So people are able to jump in and check a copy of the manual for themselves. So if you haven't read through them, you can check with me, check with Stephanie or Amanda, and any of us can get you the correct link to get in there. And Stephanie can get you set up with a password if you're not already in the system to get to the members only side. So it's certainly worth a read. Steve asked how long it takes to read through the degrees. So anybody who's interested in reading them, who's never actually looked at the full language, it's all available on our website now.
Way back when I was in high school, I could actually check out a copy at the local library of the subordinate manual. So it's out there, it's available. I know you can get the most current copy, like Phil said, online through the National Grange to read them. That's where most of what I've done tonight. I cut and paste highlights from the National Grange website just for my notes. So it's a good tool, and even if you don't have that access or can't get through it, go to your local Grange. Even says there that these manuals can be checked out through your steward to take home and to learn your part if you're going to do it the degrees, or just to read it and study. And there's a lot in there that's not just the degrees, but in the instructions for how to put on the degrees. So there's a lot in those where you get a lot of lessons out of those on the instructions, not just the actual wording of the degree itself.
Roger, the other piece that a lot of states may have access to.
You muted, Christine.
I see that. It says that the host muted you. I guess I get that.
That was my bad. I clicked the wrong button. Sorry, Chris.
That's all right.
Yeah, sure you did.
I just got myself fired, I think.
I'll remember that. No, there's a lot of states, I think, that put out some little guidebooks on the ritual and performing it and things to consider that were even more descriptive than what you find in the manual. I know the Washington State Grange had this, it was always covered with green paper that was handed out for decades on doing the degree work and the opening and closing with all of those details that you don't see written in the manual. And I know there's a lot of those that are out there that help to kind of dispel the mysteries or make it a little bit easier to say, okay, what do they really mean when they say to do X, Y, Z? But yeah, some of those things would be available to share for sure as well if people were looking for additional assistance.
I noticed one of the comments, someone was wondering what the meaning of the obligation was. I was going to pull it up here. Okay, on the out of the obligation ceremony, In the presence of our Heavenly Father and these witnesses, I do hereby pledge my sacred honor that whether in or out of the order, I will never reveal any of the secrets of this order or communicate any of the ritualistic work of the order to anyone unless legally authorized to do so. That portion of it basically is your obligation to secrecy in the order. The whole part about secrecy has kind of been played off. You have to consider at the beginning of the order when there was still a lot of mistrust in the country after the Civil War. So you didn't want people to infiltrate the Grange that might be wanting to do something that was not against or was against what the Grange philosophy was. I know after the war, you had a lot of the Klan was involved. And there was a lot of mistrust. So that's where a lot of the secrecy in the order came about. So at the first part of that obligation, you were just basically going to be true to the order and not reveal anything that could let someone in that might seek to harm your organization. Then, of course, I will conform and abide by the laws of the state and the nation, the Constitution, rules, and regulations of the Grange at all levels. That's kind of self-explanatory. You're just going to follow the Constitution and follow your Grange rules. Never propose for membership in the order nor sanction the admission of anyone I have reason to believe an improper person, nor will I oppose the admission of anyone solely on the grounds of personal prejudice. That goes with our inclusiveness. You might have a grudge against someone, but they're not a bad person. Don't hold that against them when you're voting on candidates, if you're voting for a member. And knowing the principles and the philosophies of the Grange, you don't want to purposely put somebody in there you know is not going to follow those examples by not admitting anyone that you believe to be an improper person. Not knowingly wrong or defraud a brother or sister of the order. Basically, we are a fraternal organization. We are a family. Families do have disagreements, do have squabbles, but you don't go out of your way to say, well, this person was completely wrong and to defame them or defraud them. Keeping the family togetherness in the Grange. I know people have said, we can sit there during the session and debate and discuss and seem like we're bitter enemies, but when the end of the day and when the final gavel falls, we're still friends, we're still family. So that's basically what that part of that obligation means. I will endeavor to be a true and faithful patron of husbandry, for perform the duties enjoined in this order and aid others in the performance of the same. Basically, you're going to do what's asked of you or what is expected of you, and you're going to help other people do what's expected of them. And that goes with the philosophies of the Grange and how you interact with your members and interact with the community. And the last part of those, should I knowingly or willfully violate this pledge, I will invoke upon myself suspension or expulsion from the order. If you feel you've done wrong, purposely done wrong, take it upon yourself to do that, to expel yourself from the order. And that's just what being a good Granger, you've done wrong, you have not followed your principles, you should probably move on, find something else. So that's kind of what the obligation broken down, the meaning of it. Anyone else? Well, we're a little longer than our 45 minutes that Phil had said we probably would be pushing it. So if anybody has anything else, go ahead and speak up, or we might just call this first session over and look forward to a second session.
Back to the obligation. What does it mean to be
Yes.
suspended rather than expelled?
That I don't know. I mean, what is being suspended in the Grange? You just don't go to a meeting for, 6 months or, 3 months or, what is suspended in the Grange? Does that mean you lose your office? You're still a member, but you lose your office? I don't really know. I haven't really seen where it's broken out, the difference between suspension and expulsion. I know you can suspend someone's charter as a Grange in itself, where they don't meet as a Grange until they get back within their, with their recommendations. But what does it be as a suspended member? It's a good question.
Well, and Roger, this is Joe from California, especially the concept
Joe.
of self-suspension. A Grange trial court within our judicial structure can impose suspension or expulsion on a member for their actions of which they have been convicted. But this concept
Right.
of a member self-imposing is pretty ambiguous.
Well, it goes back to the higher manhood and womanhood. Be the bigger person and say, okay, like I said, if you say knowingly wronged a brother or sister of the order, suspend yourself until you have reconciled with that person. Be the bigger person and work on correcting the situation before you go back to a meeting. Maybe enhance the situation from what it was instead of resolving it.
If I may add quickly, Matt Espenshade, Pennsylvania. I always
Matt.
read it that I agree to accept the consequences of my actions. That's kind of what I always interpreted it as. So that if I did an act that was wrong in the eyes of the Grange, that I would accept my expulsion from the organization.
Roger, this is Susie from Oregon.
Hi, Susie.
And back a little bit, we've been having some discussions about why the cloaks are only worn by women, which I can kind of understand from the timing, but a lot of our newer members want to know why the guys don't have to wear it too, because they really do get judged on how they're dressed and that when they're out in public.
That's a good question, Susie. I'm not sure why. That's something I have to look into, maybe history of the degrees, see if there's a reason. I know in the degrees it just states that outward appearance. I know you think about when 1873, 1867, when Granges were being organized, some of the women would probably have been able to dress nicer than men. Most of them were probably whatever their work clothes were. They were farmers. They were all farmers, but some of the women's dresses might have been a little nicer. I really don't know. I'd have to look at some history of why it was women only.
I think that the cloaks come when there were the separate degrees, and why when they put them together they didn't make them all. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll have to go back to some of the old manuals that have both degrees and see what it says in there about it.
Roger, I think the term suspension generally, particularly with a subordinate, so refers to somebody that that the Grange disconnects from the order, particularly because they haven't paid their dues. And it's permanent unless they, of course, reapply and are re-voted on.
Right. We want to know about the self-suspend. What do you do to self-suspend yourself from the Grange? And as it says, I will invoke on myself suspension or expulsion. So you're invoking upon yourself. What is the self? I know you can be suspended for lack of dues, but what would a self suspension be is a question that I have is how do you suspend yourself?
And
Frankly,
Roger,
I've
looking
never
through
known
the
anybody to do that, except they get tired of it and say, I want to demit or I want to be dropped.
and looking through the digest and bylaws, I don't see anything that talks about self-suspension. It only talks about, a member being suspended for, as you said, lack of dues or not fulfilling the obligation or brought up on charges. So I can't find anything that references self-suspension.
Yeah, the bylaws, it's not in there.
Mm-mm.
I think part of the obligation is just saying that you're going to be the bigger person, and if you think you're doing wrong or you realize you've done wrong, that you will take the action to correct that. Hold yourself accountable. Anybody else have anything? All right. Well, thank you everyone for making this first lessons of the degrees an experience and give me some good ideas of what to work on for the second.
Yeah, thank you for hosting tonight, Roger. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Phil.
I do want to point to some resources that we talked about tonight about the heirloom program. If you missed that link, it's very simple. It's bit.ly/Grange heirloom, all in lowercase. We just started year C of the heirloom program this month here in March. And that's not just the degree work. It also includes some of our founding documents and guiding documents of the National Grange. But there are a lot of little snippets from the degrees in there that are great kind of entry points into the degree work and kind of help guide the work of the Grange and getting members who have never heard any of that language involved. And then we did also talk about the manual. So our next meeting with the lessons of the degrees will be, I believe it's the second Monday in June.
June 10th. Yes.
June the 10th. There we go.
I think we're doing second Monday every month with the exception of September's, and I think it's the third because there's something else going on.
Something there.
If anyone has any questions or comments or anything, please feel free to email me. It's rogerbostwick@hotmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you. Give me some ideas for the next one of what questions are. I look forward to hearing from you. And thank you again for participating tonight. Hope to see you.
Thank you, Roger. And this will be up on YouTube again by the end of this week for sure. Probably tomorrow if I really get on it. So thank you all for being here tonight.
Phil, you record all of the comments so I can read those back, or will those be on the recording?
No, I'll download a document that has them all in and I'll send to you.
Okay, because I know there's some questions in and I didn't get a chance to read them all. So if you can send that to me, I'd appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thank you all for being here and have a great week. See you soon.
All right.